Very well. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining once again on the WBCSD webinar on business leadership on climate action and building resilience. This webinar is part of the WBCSD virtual event series, which we have launched in recent weeks as a means of communicating and sharing insights with our members and with the broader business and NGO community around the role of business in advancing sustainability action in this crucial year of 2020, which is the super year for sustainability, super year for action. And despite the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that is hitting us now, we all know that this is a year where advancing action on climate, advancing action on all areas of sustainability is crucial to bring us on track with the systems transformation that we need. I just wanted to flag to everybody that the session is being recorded. This recording will be made available on the WBCSD website in a few days after the event. So we will be able to share the link to the recording and the slide deck with all the participants, and you will be able to share this with your colleagues and networks freely. So before getting started, could we go to the next slide, please? Peter, this is myself, your host for today. My name is Carl Vella. I'm the Climate Policy Manager here at WBCSD. It's very nice to meet you all. We have a packed agenda for today. We have some great speakers. But before going into the speaker list and the agenda for today, I must share with you some housekeeping instructions. Like I said, the meeting is being recorded. The participants are muted, but if you would like to share with us, and we really encourage you to share with us and communicate with us your questions and views on what is being discussed, please do so in the chat function. We will pick up some of the messages and questions for the speakers through the chat function, so please do that at any point in time during the recording. We do have a message which we need to share with you regarding, next slide please. Okay, let's start with a Mentimeter. So we're going to start with a Mentimeter question for today. I please encourage you to connect to menti.com using the code 698384. So for those of you who are familiar with Menti, this should be quite simple. For those of you who are not, please just open your web browser, connect to menti.com and use the code 698384. And please answer the question, how did you hear about this event? This is just a very quick survey we're doing in collaboration with our events team, just to monitor sort of the way people are learning about these events. You do have the instructions also from my colleague Tamara in the chat function. I see some people already giving out your replies. Thank you so much for that. You see the numbers rising. We already have 74 participants already connected to the call today, so I'd like to see the numbers really go up. We're going to use Mentimeter a couple more times today, so I encourage you to connect to menti.com, use the code 698384, and let's get those numbers up. Many people have heard of the webinar through personalized emails from the website. Very good, 28. Let's try and get a few more in. And thanks so much for doing this survey. This is really important input for our events team that are managing the WBCSD virtual event series. So thank you so much for feeding this in. Very good, we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, very good. So we have quite a few respondents who have replied that they've heard about this through personalized email, and quite a few more from WBCSD websites and through partner networks. So that's very, very good to see. Very well, we'll go on to the next slide. And this is just a very quick reminder of our antitrust statements, and we really encourage the people who are speaking in this webinar, but also the people who are in the chat, to avoid any discussions in any conversation that have competitively sensitive topics nature, such as pricing and costs, bidding strategies, future capacity, additions or reductions, customer-related discussions, or discussions on decisions on output. So this is a reminder from our side. Very good. The agenda for today, we have, like I said, three very topical discussions today that will be opened by a keynote from our Managing Director for Climate and Energy in WBCSD, and also the CEO of the Women Business Coalition, Ms. Maria Mendeluce, who will open by telling us about the urgency for business climate leadership in this decade of delivery. We will then have two panel discussions. The first focused on business climate leadership in action, where we'll have, once again, a great panel of speakers, and a second panel discussion looking at the key policy enablers. So really, what kinds of policies do we think are needed to accelerate climate action and to build climate resilience? So that's today's agenda, quite packed, as you can see. And we will kick off right away with a quick Mentimeter question, which we put to you, asking you to describe the current level of business climate action and leadership in one word or phrase. And we do have a few options here that you can use, so please feel free to really throw at us sort of what you think is the current level of business climate action and leadership in this crucial year of climate action. So once again, connect to menti.com, use the code 698384, and we'd like to see your questions starting to be fired through the system. Thank you. So once again, please everybody connect to menti.com, use the code 698384, and just input what you think are the main elements of the level of business climate leadership currently, using a word or a phrase. We'd like to see these questions popping up on the screen soon.
Carl,
very well. I see that we're having some problems with the Menti slide not going on to the second question. So perhaps we can skip this question and jump straight into the next part of the debate. We have with us Maria Mendeluce, the WBCSD Managing Director for Climate and Energy and CEO of the Women Business Coalition. Give us an opening keynote around the urgency for business climate leadership in this decade of delivery. Maria, over to you. Great to have you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, everybody. It's really nice to see so many of you on the screen and the participant list. So as you have seen, I'm transitioning. Well, I'm not transitioning. I'm having a dual hat at the moment. Continue to work on climate and energy, something that I have been doing for WBCSD for the past 12 years. And I have taken this new role of as CEO of Women Business, which is taking most of my time. And I'm very pleased to be in this call with Nigel Topping, who was the predecessor, the former CEO of Women Business, and now the high-level champion for the COP26 presidency. So I cannot thank enough Nigel, and he knows that, on how much he has done for Women Business and where he has placed the coalition. And so my role is much easier than it was for him, because I can just try to to improve what he has greatly done in the past few years. So this is a really important time for climate. So last Friday, the Race to Zero was launched by the high-level champions. Both Nigel and Gonzalo are with us today, and they will help us understand what this Race to Zero means. There's lots of ambition and commitments have been quite substantial in the past years. And what we are trying to do is that we are all trying to go towards the same goal, which is to reach zero emissions as soon as possible. And WBCSD has launched the SOS 1.5 framework also last Friday, which is the roadmap for companies to get to net zero. We are trying to help companies understand what it is that they need to do. And while on the Low Carbon Technology Partnership Initiative, the emphasis was more on the technologies, may I ask people to mute their lines if they can, because we're hearing some background noise. So while the emphasis of LCTPI was on the technology, on SOS 1.5, we're looking at what are the activities that companies need to do at the strategic level. So it's not only about the climate action, but how do you integrate those climate action within the company, the strategy, procurement practices, HR, relationship with stakeholders, etc. I do highly encourage you to read the report and to give us feedback and to see whether what we have put together after consulting with more than 30 companies makes sense to you. This comes in a moment that is quite is kind of dramatic for society and the world today, with the COVID pandemic hitting. And while some countries in Europe are starting to see, the end of the tunnel, other countries are still in the middle of it. I hope that you're all safe and that you are taking care of your close ones. The COVID pandemic will go away, and we know that, even if we don't know how it will go away still. We know that the climate change pandemic is still here with us for a big time, and we need to do as much as we can to build back better. So Build Back Better has been a theme that we started to advocate for in the past couple of months, and it has taken a lot of traction. So Build Back Better means that companies need to internalize the risks, both environmental, social, and of which climate change is a big risk, into the company reporting. And the work that our colleague Rodney Irwin is doing with Lois and Luke in redefining value is very important, because it's helping companies be prepared to report according to the TCFD recommendations. The pandemic has shown us that it's important to listen to science. And science is telling that of the systemic nature of the risk that we are confronting, both COVID and climate change, that can have enormous impact in the full society, economic, health, environmental, etc. And so we need to listen to science and to act upon. And that's why Race to Zero, SOS 1.5, and many, many more initiatives are pointing into that direction. Also, COVID and climate change are closely interlinked, because we have seen the connections, the impact that air pollution can have on health, that climate change can have on people's health, and the impact that is also having on the conditions. So while it's a horrible number to be highlighting, there are around 400,000 people that have died because of COVID, of the coronavirus. And we know that there are 7 million people that prematurely died every year because air pollution. So I think we need to fight coronavirus, but we have a bigger fight, which is air pollution, climate change, where we all ought to work together to do so. Another important aspect that is part of the Build Back Better narrative, and that we'll hear more and more from member companies, is talking about the connections. We need to build back better. Countries are going to put millions, trillions of money into stimulus packages, and how can we direct those packages to solutions that will prevent us from the big crisis, which is climate change. And we need to remind ourselves that some of these low carbon investments can can bring more jobs than conventional investments. And there is a very important advocacy movement towards channeling those investments to the green recovery and to climate action related actions. In fact, 25% of the money that the European Union announced a couple of weeks ago on the recovery packages and the new investment framework of the European Union is going to go towards climate change activities. And that's quite a lot of money, because we are talking about 1.8 trillion euros to be spent in the next cycle. And last and not least, it is important that we build back better to build a more resilient society. At WBCSD, we worked on resilience a long time ago. It was back in 2011 when we did some work on building resilience in the power sector. And at that time, what struck me is that actually companies can build resilience. They know how to do it. They can come back to normal operations quite fast, as we've seen also in this crisis. But if societies, if the communities where they operate cannot come back to normal life, then they will suffer enormously. This is what we're seeing in COVID, and this is what we can see also with the impacts of climate change. So building a more resilient society, it's a fundamental part of the Build Back Better messages and the activities that WBCSD will undertake in the following years. So it is very important as we discuss, and I think this group is a group of, we all think quite alike, and we reinforce each other's and we build upon each other's messages. And we see as part of Women Business that there are three main pillars of action for business. We need to act on ambition, so set ambitious targets. We will hear more about the Race to Zero and other targets. We need to activate action. We need to accelerate action because we need to reduce emissions by half in the next decade. And that's not easy. That's transformational change. And for that, we need to act individually, but also collective. And that's where activities like the one we are planning to do on SOS 1.5, but the work that my colleagues are doing on the energy solutions, on the agriculture solutions, on circular economy do contribute to this transformational change that is needed. And then we need to advocate. We need to be consistent on how we advocate in different forums. So the companies are going to be under much more scrutiny to make sure that you are saying the same thing in all the forums, and that it doesn't happen that often. Sometimes it happens that the headquarters will say something, and then in the countries people would say different things, and you're going to be scrutinized, and you have to be careful of that and track ththose interventions and ensure that you have a consistent advocacy messages, and also not only in what you say as a company, but also in the organizations that you belong to. The combination of the three of them, ambition, action, advocacy, is what we call the ambition loop, and what is going to help us go much further and much faster. And that's what the world needs. I was just reading my emails, and there is a message from Boris Johnson this morning that is calling for a cleaner recovery. It's just echoing all the messages we have been putting forward on the Build Back Better, and I have heard from other governments that they're pointing in that same direction. So just a thought that I had this morning, I'm not sure how true it is, but looking forward to your reactions, is that actually I think, business, quite a lot of business, or the business that are in this call, are quite convinced. Many governments in Europe especially, but also in other countries, are convinced. But now we need to bring this message to the SMEs and to society, and to those that think that actually, building back better and building a low carbon future, it's more expensive, it doesn't make sense, we need to survive. And all those messages are the ones that we need to fight against with good arguments and with good data. And so this is the last point I want to bring to this conversation. as we work together under the WBCSD policy activity, but also as we unite efforts with Women Business and other organizations, we need to be much more sophisticated in the messages that we send to policymakers that talk, and to the society, that talk to the issues that they're worried about. And the issues that they're worried about is how can we come back after this strong hit into many businesses to normal operations, and do it in a way, as we say, that it needs to fight against climate change, but it needs to also guarantee their survivals in a moment where the economic situation is not that great. How can we advance these solutions so that people can see that they can afford these solutions, that they can buy electric cars, that they can buy renewable energy, and that is as competitive as other sources of energy? And how we can make sure that society will understand that that there's no choice, that Build Back Better is the only way forward, and that it makes sense for them as well, for their lives, for their lifestyles, for their well-being. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. We have a lot to work in the coming months, even if even if we won't see each other in physical meetings, these Zoom calls, and I have to congratulate the WBCSD team because they all happen like really smoothly. We need to better work together in making sure that these messages are brought forward to the countries, to the cities where you're operating, so that we can help politicians and business build back better. So thank you very much, and over to you, Nigel.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for the very inspiring words and the great, let's say, insights into the role of business and how we are also seeing, say, business, private sector leadership. Even in this time of crisis, we are seeing companies coming forward with ambitious pledges. We saw last week the launch of the Race to Zero campaign, and we will see a very strong call to action from our speakers in the next panel debate. So, as mentioned, we will go now into the next panel, the first panel discussion for today, focusing on business climate leadership in action. The panel will be moderated by Mr. John Williams, a partner of sustainability and climate change at PwC. And we have three great speakers: Mr. Nigel Topping, UK High-Level for COP26, Ms. Sarah Goulart from EDP, Head of Climate and Environment at EDP, and Mr. Anirban Ghosh, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Mahindra. John, I'm pleased to hand over to you. Have a great discussion, everyone.
Great. Oh, thank you very much, and good morning to both my fellow panelists and also the participants. I was just going to sort of give a few framing remarks before calling upon Nigel first to speak. I was sort of talking to a client of mine at a large insurer last week, and much as Maria was talking about the parallels between COVID-19 and climate change, and he reminded me that for the last 10 years, scientists and the West Global Risk Report have been talking about a global pandemic. And we sort of heard the message, but there always seems to be more urgent things to do. A financial crisis, cybersecurity, the threat of terrorism, etc. And somehow, although we knew it was a global problem, we knew it could be big when it hit us, but we didn't know when it might hit us, we weren't as prepared. Government weren't as prepared, business wasn't as prepared. And now COVID is upon us, it's quite clear that the economic and human cost is going to be significant. If I think about the parallels with climate change, we absolutely have to avoid losing sight on what we have to do to stop climate change. We don't have as much time as we maybe had 10, 20 years ago, and therefore, leadership and action is absolutely required. I can absolutely understand that businesses are focused on, in some cases, survival, and governments on the economic and human recovery from COVID. But there are some good signs of leadership, and last week was a great week for leadership. The launch of the Great Reset Agenda, the launch of the Race to Net Zero campaign, and I'm going to let Nigel very much pick up on that. And also the announcement today that Maria mentioned from the UK Prime Minister in response to 200 companies in the UK, including PwC, calling upon the government to build back better. And also, as Maria mentioned, the SOS 1.5 project from WBCSD. But it's going to take great leadership to move those commitments into real action so we avoid the lost decade we had after the financial crisis. And I can't think of three people better to talk about leadership than Nigel, Sarah and Anaban, who I have on the panel. And I'm going to start with Nigel, and I guess the question I'm going to ask to all of you is, what does leadership look like to you? What can business and government do? And if you've got a practical example, please share it with us. So Nigel, the microphone is yours.
Oh, thank you, John, and morning, everybody. Let me just start by thanking WBCSD and Carl and the team for bringing us all together. And I have to take the opportunity to both thank and congratulate Maria. Thank you for your kind words, Maria. You know, when you move on from a position, there's always a sort of emotional, there's a bit of grief, right? So having stepped down from We Mean Business to take this new role, I was obviously very keen to see that my successor as CEO was someone up to the job, and I'm really thrilled that Maria's taken that job on. And I know, Maria, you'll take the coalition to the next level. So well done and thank you. You know, I think this question of what is leadership, I think there's lots of sort of details to it. I'd just like to emphasize two, really. I mean, one is committing to something that you don't know how to do. And I know stylistically that's difficult for some people, but when we talk about the zero carbon economy, none of us know how to do it, right? We might as well admit that. We've got kind of pathways and ideas, right? But the future will unfold in a way that is full of surprises. Some of them pleasant as we drive costs down faster, some of them unpleasant as the political headwinds buffet us. But I think that I didn't go to business school, but I'm told that's kind of MBA leadership 101 is the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And I know looking at I can remember, and I'm looking forward to Anaban. I think it was when we were in San Francisco when Anaban was on stage talking about science-based targets and announced, somewhat shell-shocked, that his chair had just reset the big, hairy, audacious goal, which he knew he was then going to have to deliver. So there is something about just setting a stake in the future and saying, we know we've got to get there. I just read and really enjoyed a history of the moon landings. You know, when John Kennedy said in 1961, we're going to land on the moon by the end of the decade, most experts thought it wasn't possible. They didn't have rockets to get humans into orbit. They didn't have spacesuits. They didn't know what the surface of the moon was like. Some people thought there might be 60 feet of dust, that the lunar module would just land and sink and suffocate everyone. They didn't even have the mathematics to calculate the orbital trajectories. All the mathematicians in MIT said you can't do it. But JFK didn't say, oh dear, there's too many problems, let's wind back our ambition. He just said, no, we're going to do it. And then the engineers solved all those problems, as we know. So I think there's something about that stake in the future. I think that increasingly, and Maria referred to this, and I think this is why it's so exciting that WBCSD have launched SOS 1.5, this is also about collective leadership. Because in order for us to go really fast, we're going to have to basically agree the pathways sector by sector so that policymakers, investors, businesses all play their part in that ambition loop that Maria talked about. I guess just to end on one specific example, John, as you asked, the thing that you know, we're all looking to the clean, resilient recovery packages from governments to see how will they really tilt the table towards the future so that more capital flows into accelerating transitions rather than in slowing them down. So my favorite example, which many of you will have seen, was the French government's condition attached to the Air France bailout, which said, you've got a strict decarbonisation target. I think it's halving the emissions per passenger kilometre by 2030. So that's, if you like, a kind of overall condition, but also a very clear condition driving innovation, which was to 200x the level of sustainable aviation fuel in the mix, from 0.01% to 2%. 2% doesn't sound like much, but everybody knows 200xing anything in 5 years is hard. So I think those kind of detailed commitments to the future from businesses and policymakers are going to be the kind of leadership that we'll need. And so if we had all fuel manufacturers, all airports, all air travel companies, and all governments committing to 2% by 2025, then the whole industry would get there, and it would be de-risked for everybody. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Sarah and Anaban. Thank you, John. Back to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Nigel. I've written on my piece of paper hairy, audacious targets, which I thought sort of stood out to me. And Sarah, turning to you as your role at EDP, maybe you could talk about some hairy, audacious targets or committing to something you don't know how to do. So Sarah, over to you, please.
Hi everyone, thank you. I'm sorry, but I'm hearing really bad. So can you just repeat the question, John? Sorry, about something about targets you were saying? Because I can't hear. My connection is really bad.
Okay, Sarah, I guess the question was, Nigel mentioned about committing to sort of big targets when you don't know how to get there. And maybe you could share some experience from EDP, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting EDP to be here. So I think that maybe we could start like 40 years ago, where we started as a company, and in fact we are vertically integrated utility. We have coal and we have gas, we have hydro, and we've been here working and operating in several countries. But in fact, just start when Kyoto Protocol came along and targets, CO2 emissions, the impacts on the companies started to increase the discussion internally, and there was a lot of skepticism. So do we move forward? How can we move forward? Is it against our own business? Can we use it as an opportunity? And it was tough discussions at the time. There were not many people that were believing in it. And when you are talking about leadership, and I think there's a milestone, an important one inside my company, when we've decided that, well, we had some knowledge on wind, but could we scale it up? And we believed in it. And suddenly, some years after that, we became the third worldwide renewable energy developer in the world, because we, being early movers, we believed that that could be an opportunity. We could see that there were some risks involved, but society were more or less with us. We needed, governments were setting some regulatory rules to promote that. Researchers were working on that. And in fact, what we've seen since that was the costs coming down. And then we saw it with solar again. So what we are seeing is, when you are being an early mover and believing in on the right path, that this is the right way to do it, even if you don't know exactly how to get there, you have the whole society with you. We are not alone in a way that you suddenly see that things are moving faster than you were expecting. And you can see that today, you see that very clearly. When you look behind and you see all the scenarios that were being made and produced, everything got faster than we expected for the sector, because researchers were there, new generations were there, technology was there. We are all pushing at the same, looking at the same direction. So I think that it was a very important milestone that we had at the time. And then coming nearby to the Paris Agreement, we understood that, well, definitely investors, they are not looking for our past, they are looking for our future. How do we invest? What are we looking for? So setting these ambitious targets, we know there's risks over there. We all know that. But if we believe that being made that we all be focused on one common target, it becomes much more simple. And we see that internally. There's discussions when we start setting targets, and we've decided that in 2020, 75% of our generation will be renewable, 73 now. But in 22, 78 will be renewable. But in 2030, 90% of our generation will be renewable. And 90% of our specific CO2 emissions will have declined against 2005 year. And that's, although we discuss it, and we have another it's with our clients that it's much more demanding now. Can we make our clients change their way of doing business? Will they be more efficient? Will they invest in that? Will they invest in solar? It's really challenging, but we are setting targets, and when doing that, it helps every one of us just being more focused. So I think that's a way of demonstrating leadership. Being recognized by science is also important, not for ourselves that much, because we believe in what we are doing, but being recognized by science-based target initiative. It just builds a bridge with society. It becomes more understandable by others, not by us. Companies know what we are doing. For some companies, it's easier. For others, it's more difficult. But society understands better. If you say, well, my target is this, and it's science-based, everyone understands where we are going and the level of ambition that the company has. So I think that's another way of putting things in a more broader and collaborative way. We all understand where we are going, and I think that we will be helped by society getting there.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sarah. That's a really good sort of summary of the journey that EDP has been on. And I like the fact that you said that progress was faster than expected. So, you know, setting an ambitious target, aligning people, technology, investment, and then being nicely surprised, a little bit like JFK trying to put a man on the moon when it was allegedly impossible. Anaban, I'd like to turn to you, you know, just to bring a different context of what committing to something you don't know how to do looks like in India for Mahindra. So please, over to you. Anaban, you need to come off mute.
Yes, thank you, John. Am I audible now? Many companies have committed to the science-based targets. Many have committed to RE100 and EP100 and so on. Just because the companies have committed to these targets, it's not fair to assume that they know how soon they're going to get there or even how they're going to get there. And I can say that with a lot of confidence because we've got a number of companies within our group who have made the commitments, who probably know 60 or 70% of the way there, but still have to figure out another 20 and 30%. And it doesn't help when chaps like me in such a situation go and say, hey, why don't you become carbon neutral? And well, thankfully they agreed, but the path there is still to be discovered. However, I echo what Sarah says in that in this journey, we've always discovered that more is possible than what you originally thought could be done. Once you get started, once you start taking actions, you discover that a lot more is possible than what you were aware of before. And one of the reasons why more is possible is because of evolving technology. So one of our companies that committed to doubling energy productivity in 25 years actually doubled energy productivity in 4. Now I know that is rather a rapid rate, but they could do that because of all the new technologies that were available for them to use. And we were fortunate that vendors would bring it to us to demonstrate and show that here are things you can do to do higher levels of energy productivity. And that leads me on to the third thing that you hinted at, John. What is the role of business? The role of business in this journey of climate change is to really provide newer and better technologies to follow a low carbon path. That to me is the role of business, not just adopt it themselves, but also make it available for others to adopt. And as business makes more alternatives available to technology and science, the movement can gather a lot of pace. And lastly, the role of government. Government actually has multiple roles. Sometimes policy must receive business. I think policy must ensure that business does not go harm as it's getting going. So that's to say how it is. But policy can also be used to make alternatives that have been made available more popular. So we can know that it doesn't cost more to build green buildings than ordinary buildings. But everybody is not building green buildings. So policy can step in and mandate that everyone should be building buildings so that all the benefits that can accrue for the future. So these were the four things that came to my job. Question that you raised. One, what is possible that you originally leadership and leadership must provide alternatives, and government policy should first and then should enable the adoption of alternatives.
Anirban, thank you very much. The line was cutting in and out a little bit. I think we picked up much of what you said, but I heard very much around the importance of setting targets. Again, echoing what Sarah said, more is always possible, particularly the use of technology, and a great example around energy productivity, the role of business in providing technology, not just for its own use, but to the market, and the importance of enabling government policy. I'm hoping that we'll get some speakers or some questions coming in for the speakers from the audience. Please do ask questions. We've got about another 9 minutes that we can run this panel for. Whilst we're waiting for a question to come in, obviously, disappointingly, the COP26 has been delayed for 12 months. And I guess the question I have to the panel is, how do we stop a 12-month delay on action? And what is it that business can do to build and maintain momentum as we head into COP26 in Glasgow in 2021? Nigel, that seems a good place for you to start, given your new role. But Sarah and Anirban, please do then chip in response to Nigel.
Well, thanks, John. I think, of course, there is a risk of a loss of momentum. Actually, everything I see from the business community and governments, actually, as they start to come out of the real crisis phase of COVID, is that there's I think the opposite is likely to happen, that we have a real building of momentum, and of course we do have more time. I mean, I think we know what the main things are that business needs to do. One is make a clear public commitment to net zero, as Sarah said. You know, I like the way that Sarah described the recognition from science-based targets not being so much to give you comfort internally because you know you've done the work rigorously, but to build bridges with society. I think also to build bridges with investors. I would say I think this is a time for business to use the voice to encourage governments to make sure that recoveries are clean, resilient recoveries. So, and I think that's a general view. And this is the sort of thing where I think you as a group, so WBCSD, and then with your influence within Women in Business with Maria's new role, can talk about the type at a more granular level around the policies that are needed. I think one thing I'm learning with being a bit closer to government in this new role is it's no good just saying we need green policy measures or we need measures that support. We need to actually say, here's the 3 things that we need so that business can phase out combustion engine in a controlled way in the next 10, 15 years. We need support for charging infrastructure. We need fiscal support until we've reached the crossover point on ticket price, and we need an end date. And if we put those 3 in place, then business will deliver probably faster than anyone could have imagined. So I think it's not thinking just of the business role within internally, but collectively. So trade bodies, suppliers, investors, all of those other actors who are shaping the future. I think so. Don't just think of what the business can do in terms of setting a goal and acting on it, but all of the ways in which it can influence the other ecosystem. That's what builds that kind of exponential change that we talked about, that both Sarah and Anirban talked about, which allows us to deliver much more than we thought was possible.
Great, thanks, Nigel. And before going to Sarah and Anirban, we've got a very good question that I think I'd just like to ask, which is around accountability from Monsieur Catan. Thanks for contributing. And really using the French government example on the bailout of Air France, who is going to hold companies to account if the provision of finance has a build back better, a build back greener sort of covenant, for want of a better word, and they don't meet it? So I don't know whether, Sarah, you want to perhaps sort of talk about accountability in that sense, or Anaban, or I can pass it back to Nigel, but I thought it was a good question at this time. I put you on the spot, Sarah. You need to come off mute.
Oh, here I am. Sorry, again, I'm having really, really big problems on trying to understand what is being said. It's going out, it's being cut all the time. So you're asking me to comment on the question?
Yes, a question that came up on the Zoom chat around accountability.
Well, ensure accountability is quite, well, I think that what is important is just become more transparent on what exactly you are doing. And so I think that's the starting point. You need to say exactly where are you standing, how can you move forward, how do you get there, but be transparent and what are the impacts of all the business. So this is a better way to then ensure that then you are accountable for what you're doing. But coming back to what the governments and their role and the role that governments have and the role of business in this specific momentum, and I think that we are in a stage where economy is a little bit slowed down, I would say, Rob, and it's a way that not just for big companies, but the smaller ones to stop and think how can they be more efficient. Because remember that some time ago, the money was coming in to invest in increasing demand, the supply of products. So in a cost opportunity phase, if small businesses wanted to invest, they would prefer to invest in producing more than producing better. And now I think that we are on a stage that this mindset can change. You are in a stage where you can look internally to your own business and think, where am I? Can I do it better? And this is how I think that there's not a loss of momentum, is the right momentum for companies to think how can they do better with what they have now, and definitely invest, use all the stimulus that the governments will give to invest in efficiency, energy efficiency, definitely. And then how can you use energy better? Even for us as consumers, can we use solar? Can we, all this decentralized way of this switch on decentralized approach? Now it's the momentum because everyone is at home. We are all increasing our own costs on energy, for instance. So it's a good momentum to think, can we use this better? Can we invest in solar? Can we invest in energy efficiency? So I think that we have to understand this momentum as an opportunity and try to understand what can we do now? How can we help climate where we are today? And being transparent and seeing how we are doing that, I think it makes company more accountable and everyone understands where we are. And this is the role of business, as told already.
Great, thanks very much, Sarah. We've got another question coming in, and I just wanted to highlight Liam's comment from Bayer around linking performance and accountability to pay, which I think is important and certainly was one of the recommendations from the TCFD that I sit on. And that really takes me to another question that's come in saying how enforceable do the speakers see things like TCFD as being, and the importance of disclosure in driving action. Anaban, I don't know whether you're able to pick the question of enforceability up and just see if you could answer that one possibly, if you're able to.
John, I hope I'm audible better this time.
You are.
Wonderful. Whenever there's a conversation on holding corporations accountable, there is an unwritten assumption that corporations can do better, but for some nefarious reason refuse to do so and therefore must be held accountable. From our experience, whenever we've seen that organizations discover that they can do better, they have more than delivered on the commitments that they have made, because keeping the commitments has been great not only for planet but also for business. So in Mahindra, we believe that if we enable business with solutions, we will not have to worry about accountability, because businesses will deliver more than what you expect them to do, because nobody wants to burn money. At this point in time, in our factories, there are 3 or 4 technologies being piloted by external agencies. And we've given them the space because we believe that if these technologies work, then we will be able to reduce our carbon footprint and also reduce our costs. So instead of thinking about holding folks accountable, if we move the bar to enabling people to do better, especially corporations, we might go a very long way. And whenever organizations do well, disclosures actually come easy, because you want to talk about the good things that you have done. But we can look at disclosures from 2 fundamental aspects, and John, your organization probably understands this better than us, that disclosures are essentially to inform the investor that we will make money in the short run and we will continue to exist in the long run. So whenever a company takes actions that helps either one of these causes or both, disclosures are not a problem. TCFD is a good framework. There are other frameworks too. The levels of overlap are very high. Other than perhaps looking at scenarios, which is specified in TCFD, if you were to do disclosures through DJSI and CDP and your GRI guidelines and sustainability reports, you're almost 70–80% there. So it's just that little bit more that TCFD helps you do. But like I said, organizations that have discovered that climate action is actually great for business will deliver more than what you expect them to deliver. And enabling more organizations to discover that is probably the right path to follow.
I know that's really well put, and actually a great way to end this panel. We are right up against time. I'm just going to sort of summarize in 3 broad areas what I heard. You know, committing to targets that you don't really know how to achieve, getting on with it and progress being faster than expected, the sort of importance of technology and of people, and then you know, very much around the role of business, both in showing what is possible and influencing government, and then the role of disclosures. We could go on and on. One thing we didn't touch on, which again has been highlighted by the events in the US, which very quickly went global last week, is that you know, issues such as COVID-19 and climate change are disproportionately going to affect you know, different parts of society. And we know with COVID, for example, that the Black, Asian and minority ethnic population has been more severely hit. We really need to make sure that as we build back better, we build back better economically, environmentally and socially in a way that is inclusive. Look, I'd like to very much thank Nigel, Sarah and Anirban for sparing their time to join me, and to thank WBCSD for putting this seminar on, and also to everyone who's dialed in for listening. Hopefully you've got as much out of it as I have, and for passing some questions. Carl, with just 2 minutes over my allotted time, I'm passing back to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, a virtual round of applause from my side to the great panelists and to John as well. Thank you so much for your great interventions and for your inspirational views on how to take forward business leadership on climate change in this crucial period. We're going to move on straight away to the next discussion, and we've had some of the speakers already talking about the importance of policy to drive, accelerate climate action and to build climate resilience going forward. So we all know that, you know, governments cannot do this alone, business cannot do this alone. We need to work together in a spirit of collaboration to drive the right types of policy development and implementation to bring us on track with the 1.5-degree objectives of the Paris Agreement. So to talk about a little bit more about what kind of key policy enablers we should be seeing going forwards, we have three great panel speakers. Mr. Carlos Saleh Alonso, who is the Director of Energy Policies and Climate Change at Iberdrola. We have Mr. Liam Condon, who is a member of the Board of Management and President of the Crop Science Division at Bayer, and Mr. Sebastian Solé, who is the Global Head of the Energy Transition and Environment from BNP Paribas. So three great speakers from three very different sectors of the economy. Perhaps we could go straight into the discussion, talking about what are the key policy enablers which Iberdrola sees. So handing over to Carlos, what key policy enablers is Iberdrola seeing as being crucial to drive investment in this crucial period, investment to 1.5, and what do you see are the main policy instruments that will help us come on track with this transition? Carlos.
Well, thank you, Carl. Are you hearing me? Please.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation for WBCSD for this interesting event. Well, the knowledge that we have had from this crisis is that all the mega trends that has been signaled for everybody keep on working. You know, scientists are reinforced. The capital market is forcing those companies to have a low carbon business plan. The low technologies are reducing their cost. The society is pushing. So we are saying that all the mega trends remains are reinforced after the COVID-19. The knowledge has to start from listening to, as has been said by Maria, by listening to the scientists. We need to make our production and consumption model much more resilient. And as has been told also by some of my colleagues, we have global and exponential problems, more diverse, frequent, intense, and with more duration, and are generating costs of orders of magnitude greater than the cost of mitigating them. And we are reinforcing the previous mantra that we were induced to claim for. The cost of decarbonizing is much lower than the cost of not doing that. But to solve exponential problem, we must not recover the previously normality with the traditional solutions. Even linear solutions are not able to tackle the climate crisis. We need to provide exponential solutions. A new way of thinking and much more ambition must be increased. And this can only be solved in my way of thinking is only three ways. First, global partnerships, not only among politicians, among countries, but also with different institutions, companies, NGOs. The SDG number 17 in the 2030 agenda was created exactly for that reason. Alliances are the new infrastructure that we need in this SDG world. The second issue is solidarity. All the threats know neither borders nor ideologies. There are people who cannot defend themselves. And if there is no solidarity, the problem does not end in a more connected world. And the third issue is policies that clearly spot the direction. Policy enablers in the green recovery plans are essential to build back better. And the good news are that we have the skills, we have the financial support, and the competitive technology that creates sustainable jobs to solve the vast majority of problems that we have in the world. But also we have good news in other sense. We don't need to start from scratch. We have very powerful and well-oriented roadmaps already launched. We have not to be reducing ambition, but to be reinforced with the COVID-19. I'm talking about the Agenda 2030, the Paris Agreement, the European Green Deal, the national climate plans, and we need to link the stimulus packages for post-COVID recovery with the green economy launched by previously mentioned roadmaps. This has to be made adding a very important word, is green conditionalities linked to the economical stimulus in all the different sectors. You know, and in this context, the NDCs, the national determined contribution, and the national laws are very key for that. They will be responsible to put the investment in the huge investment in the most efficient places. For instance, establishing fiscal reform, leveling the playing field, eliminating direct and indirect subsidies, and establishing the polluter pays principles, not only for CO2, but for the rest of the externalities also. Always taking into consideration vulnerable groups. Take care of avoiding locking in some investment that in 4 years we have to stop them. And defining not only long-term objective in 2050, but also short-term and medium-term, because all the people that are working in the companies remains now and remain in 5 years, but not in 2050. And as has been told, this establishing obligation for decarbonization disclosure. You know, the TCFD is key for that. And today in the press, we can see that central bankers warning the world's, I'm reading it, the world governments and monetary authorities should not help polluting companies wrecked by the coronavirus, wrote Andrew Bailey, Mark Carney, and other current and former central bankers in The Guardian. So it's very important, the capital market influence in the pathways. And important also, defining independent governance from governments is very key to that. And also the adaptation of the current administrative procedures that allow for exponential growth in climate-friendly solutions. For instance, we have a start and we have commissioned very recently the biggest PV plant in Europe, 500 megawatts of PV plant, but we encounter administrative procedures that are defined in the past for nuclear plants, you know, and has not sense that we expend a lot of time in the administrative procedure if we need exponential solution. And we can talk later about the way that we are working in Iberdrola, but the main issue is that we are supporting all this need of action and urgency and defending that the same mega trends that previous to COVID-19 remains in the current situation. And we defend that our business model with these mega trends in the 20 years ago has demonstrated that is a successful model. So if we have the same mega trends functioning now, the green economy will remain as the best option for not only for the planet and the citizens, but also for the shareholders.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Carlos. I think you touched on a lot of, let's say, important points in what we're seeing now emerging from different players in the business community. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Liam Condon from Bayer. Bayer obviously is a company that is very much linked to science, right? And obviously the world that we're operating in terms of sort of driving sustainability, driving climate action is also very much dependent on what science is telling us. So perhaps you could share with us some insights from Bayer in terms of what policies Bayer is seeing as being crucial to drive the right types of investment in technologies that will help the transition in important sectors like science, like agriculture, towards neutrality and net zero. Over to you, Liam.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Carl, and thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here today. So I'd like to make 3 main points and just give some concrete examples to try and bring it a little bit to life, relating also to the industry that I work in, which is agriculture, which is responsible for a quarter of all global emissions. So a big part of the problem today when we talk about climate change. And I'd like to echo what one point as the first point, what Maria already mentioned and also what previous panelists already mentioned, the importance of ambitious targets. This for me is the starting point of any good policy. If I reflect on again, my industry, what does that mean? Agriculture being responsible for a quarter of all global emissions, we believe agriculture can be done in a carbon zero manner. And we believe that should be the vision for the entire industry, but that's something that also governments need to buy into and would need to be propagating to really have a chance of achieving this. So going from a quarter of all global emissions to zero would be a fantastic path forward, but there needs to be a consensus around that ambition level. On a second tier level, from a company point of view, clearly we need to have ambitious targets. So for us as Bayer, as an example, like many companies probably, we have a net carbon zero policy by 2030. And as I mentioned in the chat, we actually link our management compensation to the achievement of this goal. And it's not only a 2030 goal, we break it down and bring it back. Now, what does it mean for 21, 22, 23? And only if we're achieving that goal, we actually get our full compensation. So ambitious targets, really important. Second point, the advancing of a functioning carbon market, which is highly dependent on an adequate price for carbon. Today, the price is simply too low to really accelerate change. And again, if I reflect in our industry, it's a nice example. Basically, farmers get paid for the volume of crops that they produce. So you try and produce as much volume as possible, but they do not get incentivized for their sustainable practices. And if they engage in a lot of sustainable practices, maybe their efficiency, in the sense of maybe their productivity might short term go down. And from a profit and loss point of view, that's not a good thing for them. Clearly, a way around this is if we also incentivized farmers for their carbon sequestration ability. And this is something that's completely possible today because basically through keeping carbon in the soil is of course has huge societal and business advantage as well. And it would be completely possible for farmers to do this today and to have a second source of income apart from growing crops. We could reward farmers for their services to the ecosystem if we have a functioning carbon market that tracks how that carbon is actually sequestered and links the farmers to a market where they actually get rewarded. And that can be rewarded through the market and or subsidies by shifting subsidies from just a volume-based approach or a size of land-based approach to actually something where they're getting rewarded for their services to the ecosystem. So that's the second point, a functioning carbon market with an appropriate carbon price, which needs to be significantly higher than it is today. And the third point I would make is we've got to prioritize science-based and nature-based solutions. We have the technology today, and again, if I use the concrete example of the agricultural industry, tremendous advances in biotechnology, chemistry, biology, the data sciences, and all of this is converging. We're able to work in a much more precise manner than ever before. We're able to track carbon emissions. We're able to track carbon sequestration. We can theoretically link farmers to carbon markets and reward them for their practices. But these technologies and advances are not available to everybody, and they're particularly not available to the most vulnerable of society, which tends to be smallholder farmers in developing markets who are most affected by climate change. So having policies that support also the most vulnerable in making both technologies, appropriate technologies, but also educational, good education around good agronomic practices available to really enforce climate-friendly policies. I think that is what is required. So ambitious targets, functioning carbon markets, and science and nature-based solutions, they would be the three elements that I would say need to be prioritized.
Thank you so much, Liam. And yeah, I mean, listening to you speak, many of the messages you brought are actually resonating very strongly with WBCSD. We've been strong supporter of the targets, strong supporter of the importance of markets and carbon pricing and different types of instruments that can help drive, change across geographies and across markets. But also the importance of prioritizing a science-based approach, looking at the role of nature. And within WBCSD, we have an entire program of work looking at, a sustainable way to invest in natural climate solutions to help drive ambition towards the 1.5 degree objective. So really, we couldn't agree more, and we're really looking forward to sort of getting more and more companies on board with this strong approach across the board. Perhaps I can rope in Sébastien Soleil from BNP Paribas. BNP Paribas obviously operating in a very different sector, banking, finance. Sébastien, obviously getting on board with the objectives of the Paris Agreement, as we know, requires a full society approach. Perhaps a question to you, which, let's say, policies or which actions is a company like BNP Paribas seeing as being the ones that will have most impact in the long term to drive climate action?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you to the WBCSD for the invitation. So yes, Carl, as you said it in your introduction, as far as climate action is concerned, government cannot do it alone, companies cannot do it alone, and citizens cannot do it alone. So really we need some collective action. So I like quite what you said, Carlos, when you talked of global partnership. And yes, we have to work together and we have to create global partnership to make it possible. So I would like to give 4 policy levels that seem to me to be very important to reach ambitious targets. So first one, it's yes, policymakers, public authorities have to bring forward a long-term vision. So what is our direction? So as Liam, you just said, it's very important to set very ambitious targets, to set a vision, a long-term vision. So luckily enough, in Europe, in France, in other European countries, we start having such targets. So France wants to be carbon neutral by 2050, same thing for the European Union. So, okay, we're getting started. At the company level, it's the same thing. More and more companies want to be carbon neutral. In BNP Paribas, we want to align all our activities with the goal of the Paris Agreement, which is more or less the same thing. So clearly, long-term vision is very important. A second thing, so it has been said many times before, it's market mechanism, carbon pricing and market mechanism. Obviously enough, carbon emissions are not expensive enough for the time being. So we need stronger carbon higher carbon prices. We need a stronger market mechanism regarding carbon. It's very important. And for instance, in BNP Paribas, we try more and more to finance carbon and capture storage products. We try more and more to finance hydrogen products. And okay, we could finance them, but for the time being, the main issue is the price of the carbon. For CCS, I'm not a technical guy here, but if we don't have a price of 100 euros or 120 euros per ton of CO2, it's very difficult to make projects happen. Same thing for hydrogen, green hydrogen, I mean. If you want to make green hydrogen projects, you need a high carbon price. So we're ready to finance them, but yes, we need higher carbon prices. Third thing is, okay, market mechanisms are good. It's fine. We need to go in this direction, but it probably won't be enough. So in some cases, market mechanism won't be enough. And okay, we will need public authorities to set obligations or interdictions, otherwise we won't do the job. One example is energy renovation in dwellings, in buildings, in existing buildings. So once again, I can take our example. So as BNP Paribas in several countries and in France inter alia, we propose loans to renovate existing buildings with very low rates. And when I say very low rates, it's 1% of 0%. So when you get a rate of at 0%, it's quite difficult for a bank to go much further. It's okay, but nonetheless, people, too few people want to renovate their buildings. So yes, we need something more. And the next point will probably for public authorities to say, okay, now when you sell your house, when you sell your department, your building, you have to renovate it before selling it. And then banks can propose loans at good conditions so that this renovation is not too expensive for people, because we know that it can be quite tricky for poor people, and okay, it will global public authorities will have to provide grants and these kind of things. But at what point we will need probably obligation to renovate buildings, otherwise we won't achieve the target. Fourth thing, to top it all, and last but not least, we need a trust framework. That is, we need transparency. We need things to make people understand that, okay, we're serious about green investment, we're serious about green technologies. We can calculate the impacts, we can make these impacts public. And for the time being, one of the best things in this field is, I think, is the TCFD. So I can, yes, we just, BNP Paribas just published its first TCFD report the year before. We included the TCFD recommendation into our global reporting, but this year, for the year 2019, we decided to publish a standalone specific TCFD report. And okay, it's very useful. It's very useful, I think, for our external stakeholders, for NGOs, for investors, because primarily it was a request for financial investors. But it's very useful for us as well, because it's a very good way to check the 11 recommendations of the TCFD and say, okay, what do we do in this field? Is it enough? Is it aligned with the best practices? If so, well, and if not, what can we do to go further? So yes, it's very important to have this kind of disclosure and transparency exercises to make sure that we do things correctly and that we can show to our external and internal stakeholders that, okay, we do our job in this great fight against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, and thanks to the three speakers for your great opening remarks. I have invited within the chat function of Zoom some questions to come from the people who are participating online. We have quite a few people online, so feel free to type in your questions in the chat function. Perhaps jumping straight back to Sebastian, we do have a question around whether companies like BNP Paribas are already linking their finance to the EU sustainable taxonomy regulation. So perhaps a quick reaction from that question, Sebastian, and then we can take some other questions, perhaps for Carlos and Liam. Sebastian.
Thanks very much for the question. Actually, in my fourth point, initially, I wanted to discuss TCFD and taxonomy. It was too long, so, but no, EU taxonomy is very important. So yes, clearly it's very important for financial institutions, for corporates, to have a common framework to be able to say this is green, this is less green or not green at all, but at least to emphasize what is green. We must keep in mind that EU taxonomy for the time being addresses only 2 environmental topics out of 6. So it's climate adaptation and climate mitigation. So there's still a lot of work to be done to identify green activities related to circular economy, to pollution control, to biodiversity and all this. So for the time being, it's very important, but it's only partial. And second thing, it's quite complex to take into account and to say, for a bank, for instance, it's quite difficult to say, okay, this credit line is going or not according to the taxonomy. So it's very complex. So that doesn't mean that we won't say it. On the contrary, it's very important, and we want to say, we want to do it, and we want to be transparent on it. But implementing concretely the EU taxonomy will take some time. Because I don't know whether we have read the report, but it's a very long report, and it's only 2 topics out of 6. So it's very important that the European Union works on this kind of things. But companies will need time to implement it concretely. So we are working on it, obviously, but it's only the beginning of a long story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sebastian. I think really that's what we're also hearing from many of the companies that are engaged in the work that WBCSD is doing on sustainable finance and redefining value. You know that this EU taxonomy regulation has really the potential to bring, let's say, the finance world into the frame of sustainability and sort of really help drive investment in the right direction. From my side, we haven't seen so many questions coming in through the chat, so perhaps I could ask a follow-up question to Carlos and to Liam. Obviously, we are still very much in a period of the COVID pandemic and the discussions now around economic recovery. We heard Sebastian and Maria also talking about the importance of trust and accountability. Perhaps it would be good to hear from you guys, what are the kinds of, let's say, policy conversations that are happening between your companies and policymakers, and which kind of policy messages are resonating strongly in these discussions around the need to build back better and recover in a better way, so that the amount of money that is available can go to really accelerate the green transition. So perhaps we can hear from Carlos first, and then from Liam. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Well, what is important, our main works are supporting all the institutions like yours, like United Nations, like the European Commission, in defending, and the model that we have to defend is the ones that have been launched previously to the COVID, because the megatrends remains in that. And our main objective is to defend that we, in the green economy, create economic growth, and we create sustainable jobs. That's why in our General Assembly some weeks ago, and our main message is that we will maintain all our jobs. Everybody's working or in the shifts or in teleworking, but also our contractors has the guarantee that we remain with our investment, but not only maintain our last year records of 9 billion euros investing in the green economy, but also we have increased 20% for this year and remain with this situation and hiring 5,000 more employees for demonstrating that we are optimism. We have optimism in the new model and in the recovery of the economy. And we have only to add 2 minor issues that we debate also, that we have not to talk only about CO2 emissions, because we have demonstrated in the situation that we have with the tragic situation with the COVID, that the other pollutants are very relevant, are completely linked to the CO2 because are produced by the fossil fuel burning. So we have to tackle with both problems, air quality and also climate change. And the other issue is that allocating the liquidity that we will have, we need to analyze the efficiency. For instance, for buildings, for heating and cooling, we have some resources that we can put or in isolation or in efficient technologies like heat pump. So at the end, you have to also in the conditionalities to analyze the efficiency of the allocation of these resources that we will have in the recovery.
Thanks so much, Carlos. Over to you, Liam. Same question.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So maybe I give one concrete example, because I'm in a CEO group that is advising on the EU New Green Deal. And it was very interesting recently that there was a big discussion around this with high political levels in Europe and huge concern among politicians that because of COVID-19 that there's going to be a lot of backtracking on commitments that have already been made. And that COVID-19, and I think it's a fair assumption, COVID-19 will result in a massive recession. There will be an impact on jobs. And they were asked, politicians were actually asking us then as industry representatives whether or not we would be committed. And for me at least, it was very encouraging to hear unisono across the board. Everybody who was participating was actually encouraging the politicians not to back down now is the new Green Deal, not to water things down. Of course, we've got to get the right balance now of getting people back into jobs. But there is no way that we can take any more shortcuts from a climate policy point of view. So actually all the companies were making the claim, look, we're building sustainability into our business models. So please, from a political point of view, you guys and girls don't start backtracking, because otherwise you're going to hurt our business models that we're now working on. So I thought that was encouraging that politicians were concerned that we weren't going to be all in. But at that level anyway, that resonated, that I think there was high alignment between the political and industrial level in Europe that we've got to use this new Green Deal to move forward and not let it be sidetracked by COVID-19.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Carlos and Liam. I think the messages there are really strong, and I think it's really about sort of making sure that the COVID pandemic and the crisis is one that provides us with sort of the vision for how we can come out of this in a better way and really keep climate change right on the forefront of the agenda and make sure that we keep our objectives from a climate perspective there and that we work together in a long-term fashion as well. Excellent. So we're reaching the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank all the speakers who have been with us today in this in the second panel. So Carlos, Liam, and Sebastian, thank you so much. But I'd also like to thank Maria, John, Nigel, Aniban, and Sarah, who spoke earlier in today's webinar. Very quick invitation from my side to everybody on the webinar today. There will be a continuation of this debate. This debate is not over. On Wednesday, the ICC, together with the WBCSD, will be hosting a discussion on why climate action is still everyone's business. We will once again have Nigel together with Gonzalo Munoz, the Chilean high-level champion, with Maria, talking about, you know, how does business work to build back better out of this crisis. So I encourage you all to take note of this date on Wednesday of this week at 2:30 p.m. Central European time. And from my side, it's just wrapping up for today's webinar. As I mentioned, watch out in your inbox for the slides and the recording of the session. Feel free to share these with your colleagues. They will be open for everybody to watch and to follow. We will have more of these webinars taking place over the coming weeks and months. So please head over to the WBCSD website to learn more about these virtual event series and also how business is taking concrete action to tackle the current crisis we are in. Thank you once again to all the speakers. Thank you once again to all my colleagues from WBCSD who have helped us to put this together. Thank you to all the speakers, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you and stay safe.